Hi, everyone. You're listening to Bug Talk, a podcast created by members of the Entomology Department at Michigan State University. In today's podcast, we are welcoming Amanda Lorenz. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
It's awesome to have you. I also have two co hosts with me. I have Ariana here. Hi, Ariana.
Hey everyone.
And I also have Natalie. Hey, Natalie.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bug Talk.
Yay. And so today we're going to talk to Ariana about undergrad education, recruitment, all things related to our undergrad program, because Amanda is our undergrad director and advisor. So why don't you go ahead, Amanda, and introduce yourself to our audience a little bit?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Amanda Lorenz. I've been in the entomology department for a few years now as an academic specialist. And so my role is kind of multifaceted. So part of what I do is I advise our undergraduate students and help with recruiting efforts. I also teach a couple of classes every semester. So I teach environmental science and entomology. And then I also help run the Bug House, which is our outreach facility that's part of the entomology department, where we do a lot of public outreach and try to teach the public about insects and why they're important and why they're cool, and try to foster kind of a positive attitudes towards them.
And before we jump into our discussion today, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm originally from Plymouth, Michigan, which is kind of between Detroit and Ann Arbor. And I started here at MSU as an undergraduate. I graduated with a degree in zoology and ended up going right into graduate school to do a master's program here in entomology. And the way that I kind of got involved in that was um, I was involved in like a teaching assistant kind of program for undergraduate students. I helped teach biology, and I was working with graduate students one on one really closely. And I was just like so excited by the kinds of research and experiences that they were able to have and do. And so I kind of worked my way into a laboratory, and it was happened to be Rich Merritt's laboratory, which was my first experience in science as an undergrad. And so I had a really good time working in his lab, and I learned a ton about bugs. And then I took aquatic entomology after I had spent a summer in his lab, and after that, it was just like, okay, insects are now what I want to do, because I had been kind of looking for a focus. And so I worked in a couple of other entomology labs. I worked in Dr. Ned Walker's lab, the insect microbiology lab, and then as part of that, I was working with Dr. Mike Kaufman as his assistant, and ended up starting a graduate program with him in 2009. So I got my master's degree studying larval mosquito ecology. I looked at an invasive species of mosquito and how it was colonizing different habitats in the Lansing area. It was really cool. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I learned a ton. And so after that, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew part of it was wanting to teach, and part of it was wanting to engage the public. And so I had a couple of kind of positions, but then I ended up coming back, getting an opportunity to come back to entomology to do a PhD. And I worked with Gabe Ording and Julie LeBarkin. Julie's actually in the geology department, but she is a really renowned education researcher. And so I did my dissertation looking at how we teach about entomology and some aspects of that, like what are kind of attitudes towards insects that might serve as barriers when we want to teach about them and educate the public. And so I did a lot of different tried a lot of different kinds of things for that, which was really cool. I ended up doing a couple of projects where I looked at or made some deductions based on how people are drawing insects, and you can infer some things, which is really cool. So yeah, and then from there, I was lucky enough to get hired in as an academic specialist, and I primarily teach. So that's like 70% of what I do. But then working with the undergraduate program has been really fun, and working at the Bug House is like a lifelong dream. So I'm pretty happy with where I've ended up.
And being the undergrad advisor is a relatively newer development, right, for you?
Yeah. So like most of my experiences before this, like I've always been teaching at an undergrad level, but I also was a laboratory coordinator, and so I supervised graduate students, and so I went from kind of working more closely supervising graduate students to now I work more closely and supervise more undergraduate students. And undergraduate is definitely like kind of a different beast in terms of like a program and what the requirements are and like what's important and what's not important. And so um, it's been a bit of a learning, kind of going back to thinking about what things were like when I was an undergrad, and I think that's been really helpful.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalie next, and we can jump into all sorts of things related to our undergrad program. Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, I actually had a question about your undergraduate advising. So I didn't do my undergrad at MSU, and I went to a very small school, so my experience was very different, I think, than the undergrads here. And we had one-on-one advisors, but they were more advising you through your degree program, like here's the classes to take and graduate, but that was kind of the extent of like the formal advising. And then from there, it was kind of up to you to find like your own research advisor slash like career advisor.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, what kind of undergraduate advising do you do? Is it like a combination of like, here's the classes, or is it also like, here's some careers? Yeah.
So it's kind of a bit of everything. I see my part of my role, like a big part of my role as an advisor is like there's so many resources and people and things here for them. And so my part of my job is helping them to navigate that, and helping them to leverage the resources that are available. And so a lot of what I do is just like talk to them and try to connect them with resources that I think are going to be good. But I also like to start by just um, kind of prodding people to talk about what their overall career goals like where excuse me, sorry, but like where do they see themselves in 5 years, kind of thing, where do they see themselves in 10 years, what are they doing in that vision, and how can we set them on a path to get there. And so a lot of what I do is helping with classes and schedules. It's also like looking at graduation requirements and making sure those are on track. But it's also help with other things like how to get involved in research. I've talked to a lot of folks about developing CVs. I've talked to a lot of folks about how to go about emailing faculty, because a lot of it is cultural. Like there's huge cultural expectations in academia, and so part of what I do is try to make like help students to navigate that part as well. So it's a lot of everything.
Maybe before I turn it over to Ariana for the next question, could you go over, Amanda, the demographic breakdown of our current undergraduate body, please?
Sure. So we've got about 19 majors and 13 minor students, or minors in entomology. And so among those students, we are about 40% male, 50% female, 74% white, about 4% Asian, 15% Hispanic, and 7% two or more races. And so I definitely think we have some targets to meet in terms of our overall diversity, but we're getting there.
All right. Ariana, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So with your undergraduate advising and the recruitment you do you find that undergrads are almost surprised that you can major in entomology? Because I know when I was an undergrad, I didn't think that was it's a smaller field. I feel like, it's not as, oh, zoology, go working in a zoo and things like that. So do you get that same kind of vibe?
I definitely do. And I think it's really interesting vibe, and it comes from a lot of different sources, I think. But yeah, I get a lot of, and that's one of the fun things about like advising people in entomology and talking to them is like to see like it open their eyes up to different possibilities in their careers and their lives that they hadn't considered before. I think like entomology it's a bit of a niche field in that it's like we're all kind of specialized and united in the fact that we study these things, and even though it's really really broad and diverse, but I think there's this tendency in like if something is a niche field and and people don't know much about it, to kind of just automatically assume that, oh, there's no jobs in entomology. But that's actually not the case at all. Like, there's tons of jobs in entomology, and it just depends on where you're looking. And so I think, like, so yes, I do get people who are surprised that it's something you can turn into a career, and I think that's part of where that comes from.
Talking about careers, do you have any way to get information back from people when they find jobs, what kind of careers they're placed in with an entomology degree?
I usually just email folks after a while. Like, every once in a while, kind of go through my list of alumni and think about, like, there's somebody where I'm not sure where they are. A lot of our students, like, calculate like 65% of our undergraduates go on to graduate school or have been going on to graduate school, and so most of them are in grad school now. And so it's pretty easy to keep up with them in that way.
Do you remember what are some of the other popular careers that people are placed in?
So lots of different things. One, maybe the more common, is like as a research technician or lab technician. Another area that people go into, I think more now than before, is outreach and education. And so we have a former student who's works at the Philadelphia Insectarium now as one of their main staff members. Trying to think, there's another. So some of our students have gone to work for like private businesses, like like landscaping, horticultural, and things of that nature.
Cool. I guess, Natalie, do you want to go ahead with the next question, please?
Yeah. So on this, I guess, like career kind of questions path, as the undergraduate advisor, what do you say to students who are not quite, they enjoy entomology, but they're not quite sure what they want to do? Because I've always kind of been one of those students that like doesn't have like a set, here's my goal for the next 5 years. So what kind of advice can we give to those students who enjoy entomology, but they're not sure what they want exactly?
I think the best advice is to kind of just try to have as many experiences as you can and do as many different things. Like, if there's something that you think you'll like but you're not sure, like, maybe try it in some capacity, whether that's working in a laboratory, or whether that is taking a class you think you might be interested in, or whether it's even like having a conversation with somebody who does that work. I think there's lots of, and that's one of the cool things about MSU and our department in particular, is that we have so many people who are doing so many things who are so cool and nice, and willing to work with people that, so yeah, just encouraging folks to get those experiences and see for themselves, I think, is just the most valuable thing.
Do you have any idea of how many of the current undergraduates are employed by labs in the department?
I've been tracking it. I haven't updated with this year's though yet, but almost all of our students.
Yeah, that's been my experience over the time in the department, that pretty much all the undergrads are taken up by labs and absorbed into research.
Yeah, I tell them, like, if you want this position and you show up on time and be a good worker, then there's nothing standing in your way. Like, there's no reason that you wouldn't get this opportunity. So
most definitely, the Ent majors always get scooped up first. But yeah, I definitely agree with like the amount of jobs entomology has and the aspects you can go into, because I know I did my undergraduate here and I was a zoology major as well, and I loved like predator-prey interactions and behavioral things of zoology. And then I went to an entomology defense and they were doing predator-prey interactions, and it had never occurred to me that you could do that with bugs too, and like all of the same things I loved about zoology you can do with insects. And then led to me obviously doing my master's here for entomology. But going to like your stats with the amount of students in our department, what recruitment efforts and things have you been doing to try to like promote diversity in our department?
So part of what I'm doing is just trying to get the word out about entomology, and that it is a program and that we have amazing opportunities for people, and really fulfilling and rewarding career paths that are available. And so part of that, like I said, is like just trying to spread the word. And so going to events, working with different groups, MSU and our college in general are really pretty nice about outreaching to the community and putting on different kinds of events. And so I did a program called Major Spotlight at the beginning of the year this year, and we did like a virtual thing about entomology for folks. But there have been other like events like that I've participated in. I'm developing some modules now that are going to become part of like a virtual summer program. And so I'm trying to do one for entomology is kind of like in more of a natural resource kind of sense, and then one as more of an agricultural basis. So participating in those things, but also I'm associated with a couple of different projects on campus. So one of the projects is led by Dr. Foster in I'm going to think abbreviation wrong, crop and soils. And that project is designed to recruit and bring to MSU students who are from underserved communities or have financial need. And so we have a couple of cohorts of scholars now who are in the program, but also another part of it is going to our local high schools in Lansing and doing some outreach and recruiting. And so I've gone and taken like live bugs and things to all the high schools in Lansing. And so just trying to get out to as many places as possible and reach as many people as possible, I think is key, but also with that message that like entomology is for everybody, and you don't have to you don't even have to have fancy science equipment to look at bugs and study bugs. They're all around us all the time. And so it really provides like a good hook, I think, to grab people and reel them in.
Yeah, most definitely. I also find it interesting that we have more women than men in our undergraduate department, which great. But when you think of entomology, most people think of like an older white man is the typical like entomology person. So I'm glad to see that our field is broadening in that sense. So
I wonder what it's like to try to recruit high school students. I think you mentioned that you're reaching out to high school students, and I feel like insects are one of those groups that are a really hard, tough buy-in, right? So most people have already formed an opinion about insects by the time they get to high school, and I feel like that familiarization process should happen earlier for people to like see it as a potential career, not be freaking out of insects. Is that something that you see when you're reaching out to high school students, that these people have already like set their hearts on like insects are gross and to be squished?
Yeah, I think that really does match with what my experience has been. So like part of what I do in the bug house is I give presentations to younger groups of students, so like elementary primarily, and there's a lot less resistance to the bugs at the outset, I find, in the younger groups. One of the challenges of going and talking with the older kids and kids in high school is that they do have kind of preformed ideas and attitudes, which like we all do, and you develop as you grow. And so that's totally fair. But in our culture, it's really kind of the norm to hate bugs and to think they're a nuisance and that they pose a danger or a threat, and to be very negative towards them or to make a big deal about it. And so like there's more screaming and alarm when I bring out the big bugs in the high school than there are with the little kids. And that can be a challenge. But what I try to always bring live if I can, because live bugs are just so engaging, especially when you can bring a couple of different things. That way, if people like hate one thing, then there's something else that they might like a little bit better. And so, but if you can get people to interact with the live bugs, I think that really helps. That really grabs them as to like, oh, like this is cooler than I thought it was going to be. And it's also a good attention getter. Like I've gone to a couple of kind of recruitment events where you have a table, and I find that if I bring bugs, like people will come to me so they can be a good attractant too. So sorry.
Yeah, definitely.
Really,
and I think
answer.
Oh, you're fine. I think for the bug house, I'm a lead guide there, so I've helped out with the events that you and Gary do. But I think the adults, the parents of those younger children, are what causes reservations, because kids will be super excited to hold something, and then parents like, get that away from me. I don't want it near me. And then that's when the kid's like, wait, why isn't this cool? I'm fine. Why are you being weird? That makes me feel weird about it. And that sets it off. But yeah, I think the younger kids is definitely the target you need, because they're just so open to it and excited.
And that's when attitudes are developing. And a lot of our attitudes are really they're modeled for us. And who models social behaviors to you but your parents when you're younger, and so they kind of have a really profound effect. But I'll also say that we get a lot of really positive, supportive parents who come in and they're like, this isn't my jam, but my kids are into it, I'm all about it. And I really, really admire that and appreciate it.
Sorry, Natalie, before I turn it over to you, I just wanted to say one more thing. And I feel like with high school students, it's almost like you have to go from the career aspect and not from the insect aspects. Like when I looked at Jeree Johnson, we had a recent podcast episode with her, and she presented in the department, and she portrayed this like amazing lifestyle that you could travel around the world working. She works in the military, but she lives in these amazing places and, has an amazing job. And I feel like for a high school student, it almost would be better to see that you could live this like wonderful lifestyle if you chose insects as a career rather than hold this insect, which is a great gateway for younger kids, perhaps. What do you think about that?
I think that's really, really good and interesting point, and it makes me want to add some more kind of stories about careers into how I go talk to students about this stuff. Um, what I found is that it can be difficult to talk about careers and like something that they can do if they're not on board with bugs are important. If that makes sense. So so helping them buy into it a little bit. I think that's what the live insects do. But you're right, like showing the fact that the the cool lifestyles you can have and the positions that you can pursue in entomology is just so like unrivaled, like so broad. It makes it, I think, like easier to follow your dreams. But yeah, so there's lots of different dreams that you can follow in entomology. So I like that idea. I'm gonna do that.
I'm glad I could contribute.
So when I was working in Rich Merritt's lab as an undergrad, my first entomology experience, Jeree was my supervisor. So I
There
worked
you
with
go.
her.
She's definitely an inspiring person, I think. All right, go ahead, Natalie.
I guess kind of along this same vein of trying to recruit more diverse students, what can we as graduate students, like how can we help with the recruitment process? Like what are some tangible ways that we can make differences, or how can we contribute to the overall department?
Um, so one of the things that I've been talking to guests about lately in Bug Club is about creating more opportunities for our graduate students and undergraduate students to like meet each other and like mingle with each other, because I think one of the biggest and best things you can do as a grad student is just talk to the undergraduates about what you're doing and what that process has been like and what you're excited about and what your goals are and where you're going with it. Because when I was an undergrad, that was huge for me, was talking to graduate students and just like, oh my god, this whole other world I didn't even know about. And that can be pretty common. Like you just don't know something until you talk to somebody about it. And so for them, talking to somebody who's at that next step of their career and has taken that, kind of taken the plunge after undergraduate, I think is really, really important. But
Go ahead.
I also want to suggest like there's lots of different ways that you can pursue outreach as a graduate student. Like there's the Women in Science Days, there's science fairs at like every school. We do a lot with the Bug House. And so I'd say getting involved in that kind of outreach too is a really good way to invest your time.
Yeah, like I said, I went to a really small undergrad institution, so we didn't really have graduate programs, or we had one, but we really only had like one or two graduate students, and they didn't really ever interact with the undergrads. And I really thought that was a big um, disadvantage to the undergraduate students, especially me who like is first generation. So I don't really like know what's going on in grad school. It kind of feels like I'm like stepping my foot out, but I don't really know where like the next step is. So I just, yeah, I think talking and trying to build these relationships is probably going to be really great and really helpful for students who um, are looking for some assurance that you can move forward in grad school and it's okay, and help keep them on this academic path, I guess.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's a really good point.
And I think that that's the point of the new fellowship, the Entomology Research and Outreach Fellowship, is to provide opportunities to those undergraduates that are in similar institutions that Natalie described, where there are no graduate programs. I think in our department, as you mentioned, Amanda, like all of these undergraduates are already with jobs in labs where they are probably working with graduate students. So these are kind of automatically relationships that are being built because we have both an undergraduate and a graduate program, and they're relatively linked well together. But I think it's important to provide that experience for those students that are unable to have that in such a natural manner, right?
Yeah, yeah, and so that's why the EROF program is so exciting, because it has the potential to bring in students who aren't like already here, and give
Yeah,
opportunities to people who wouldn't otherwise have them. So that's really cool.
cool. Ariana, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So you have a big job. Like you have your hand in a lot of different pots. So do you have a favorite? Like, is outreach your favorite? Is teaching your favorite? Is undergrad recruitment? If you had to pick one, could you?
So it's really tough. There's aspects of all of them that are really awesome. And there's aspects of all of them that are less awesome. And so it kind of just depends. Like sometimes I'll be real jazzed about a project I'm doing for the bug house. Sometimes I'm, one week I'm more kind of in depth. I'm changing some lectures on my teaching, and so it just kind of depends on what week it is.
What about your favorite aspect of each component then?
Um, that's a good. I love that question. Okay, so I can choose. My favorite aspect of undergraduate advising is being helpful to people, and like getting to be encouraging and be kind of like a cheerleader. I really like that. I also kind of like the problem solving aspect, because someone will come with like, um, I can't get into this class and I don't know why, and so I've got to go figure out why. I'm not a huge fan of the bureaucracy aspect of it, so lots of forms and stuff, but that goes along with anything. So in terms of the bug house, I love writing programming and work like um, Ariana worked with me to create a video for Science Fest, and like making that was so much fun. Um, so I really enjoy that more creative aspect, but I also enjoy just like getting to interact with the bugs and get people excited about them, and kind of see their faces light up. That's always really fun. Um, and then with teaching, it's kind of the same thing. It's like opening up people's awareness of different aspects. So, like environmental science course, we talk about insects. We talk about like sustainability and how important the planet is, and so yeah, I like lots of different aspects of different things.
I think we're very fortunate to have the bug house. It has had a huge influence on one of my first graduate students, because she was a bug house guide for the entire duration of her program when she was at MSU, and she ended up becoming a 4-H extension agent because of that, because she realized that she likes working with students. And 4-H programs, for those that don't know, from the entomology side of things, you're basically going out to schools and talking to students about entomology, or going to fairs and interacting with youth um, related to entomology. So she has picked up that as a career. It was so influential for her.
And I think it's a growing area. Just like outreach and also like tourism associated with entomology and things like that. But yeah, I think that's really cool. And she makes amazing programs too. Like I've seen some of her work and it's incredible.
Yeah. All right, Natalie, do you want to go ahead with the next question?
Yeah. This is more a question about the demographic of like our undergrad program that we talked about earlier. And this I think is maybe just more for my curiosity. But of the students who are minoring in entomology, um, do you know, is there like what is like their major typically then? And do you know like how then they were like, oh, I want to minor in entomology?
So every person has their unique journey. I'm gonna look at my list and see, just read a couple. So we have, I think most of our students who are minoring in entomology are majoring in some other College of Ag and Natural Resource major. So we got fisheries and wildlife. I've got quite a few horticulture majors that are entomology minors, but also like iBio, but also let's see, MMG, the Road College of Business. We have a student minoring in entomology.
Wow,
So
that's strange.
I've had a fashion design major who minored in entomology. So yeah.
Well, maybe something that we can talk about related to that are the classes that one has to take to complete an undergrad program. Because I know that I have had people working in my lab that had or were going through a minor in entomology, and they were, I think, zoology major or biology major or something along those lines, but they were telling me that the classes that they had to complete for their major were very similar to what was required for the minors. So it didn't take like a lot of extra effort to complete a minor. So it made sense to do that while they were at it. So can you talk about like some of the courses that are required, and maybe like how is it similar to like what I mentioned, biology, was it, or zoology?
I bio now. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I bio, I always
No.
forget.
So the minor program it's 15 credits in entomology, and so 404 is the required course for that. But then beyond that, it's just choosing different elective courses in entomology, and so I can definitely see how many of our elective courses in entomology will be similar with elective courses in iBio. Like in iBio, you have animal behavior and you have invertebrate biology and herpetology, and in entomology, we have aquatic entomology, medical entomology, insect physiology. Um, shoot, sorry, my brain is. Pesticides and pest management, pesticide in the environment. So we've got lots of different electives in entomology. And so for the minor program, you take Ent 404, and then you take as many other entomology electives as you need to reach that 15 credit total. And
I've seen undergraduates in my graduate classes. So is it just them like looking at graduate level classes and seeing what ones they like, and then you get them an override, or do you take apart like their interests and you're like, oh well, this graduate level class could be really fun for you, and how does that go?
So usually I give recommendations based on that. And so we, and generally, like, I don't recommend that graduate level courses until students are like juniors or seniors, but especially if they've been working in a lab. Like a lot of our entomology seminar courses for grad students are discussion based, and so you read papers and you talk about them, and that I think is something that um, our upper level undergraduate students are able to do. Um, and so yeah, it's just like different people. So like if you are somebody who's really really interested in pollinators, um, we don't have a whole lot of pollination ecology courses, but we do have a new seminar that's a graduate level one that's being taught. And so if you're a senior and you're interested in pollination ecology, I might steer you towards that if that's something you're interested in and if the professor's okay with it. That's another big thing too. Like the instructor has to be okay with it. Occasionally we'll have undergraduate students take like systematics and taxonomy. So either adults or immatures. But again, it's a lot of time. And so I make sure that the student doesn't have 5 other classes that are high level that they're trying to do and that they are going to have time for it, and that they get a start on their collection over the summer. So I always talk to them, and I have to approve it before they can take a graduate level course.
Most definitely. It's always interesting to see their opinions in those discussions, like you mentioned, reading papers and stuff, because we all have different views going into it. So they really help discussion, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I think it's also just part of being indoctrinated into the culture of academia is like having this kind of discourse and discussion and moving through these papers. Like that's always going to be useful. And honestly, you have to do it a million times before you become like really comfortable with it anyway. So, uh, they, I've been told that they are good experiences for the students.
Yeah, I definitely get undergraduates in my scientific communications course from time to time. They show up in there, and I do have to approve them, but yeah, they're great. Let's see, Ariana, was it? Oh, I think you had the question last, so maybe let's go back to Natalie.
I guess just kind of a follow-up. Is the entomology program for undergrads that are majoring, is it a BS or a BA program? And do you ever have students like express like concerns about like one or the other? Because my program was a BA, and it was like a big discussion about us, or like between us when we were like choosing our majors, like should I even try to get a science major that's a BA? So I want to know if that ever comes up and what's going on with that.
So it's pretty simple for us. I do remember thinking of like debating that when I was in iBio when I was a zoology major a long time ago. But in entomology, we only offer a BS, and so my general understanding of the distinction is that the core requirements are a little bit different for a BA versus a BS, with a BS requiring maybe some more rigorous science courses. But we only offer the BS in entomology.
Yeah, so my undergrad only offered BA. And I know like everybody was really concerned about it. And then it turns out like I go to grad school and it doesn't matter. It seems like it doesn't really matter. So
yeah, I think for graduate school especially, it's more about like who you are and less about like what's on paper. Kind of.
Yeah, as a person that has graduate students, I can definitely attest to that I really don't mind either way, as long as the rest of it fits in the picture of what we're looking for. It really doesn't matter if it's an A or an S. I don't know how it is in other universities, but I think for the most part here, people don't really mind either way.
Yeah, I've never heard of any issues with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned earlier, like getting the graduate students and the undergraduates connected. How is that going to go about? Because I think it is super important because we all have different experiences getting into grad school as well, because there's so many different avenues you can go about, and I'm interested in learning more about how we're going to approach that relationship between us.
So what we had talked about, and so I talked about this with Allie and Austin, was about having a joint meeting. And I have to like circle back to that conversation of when they wanted to do that, but that was how we were going to start it off, was to have a joint meeting, just kind of like a get to know you kind of thing. And then we were thinking about other things that we could schedule as well that would kind of naturally bring people together. So at some point we're going to COVID will abate and we'll be able to get back on campus. And so we talked about doing like little bio blitzes just like around campus, looking like taking an hour, and then we all go out and look for bugs and you can talk to people. And so just trying to set up more opportunities for these two groups of students to come together, I think is key.
Yeah, definitely. I think that'll be incredibly beneficial.
I hope so.
So I'm a little bit behind on this, but it doesn't mean that so our student society is called graduate and undergraduate.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently what you're talking about here, it means that the undergraduate students do not come to any of the meetings that the graduate students organize. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm like filtering
Yeah,
from this conversation.
Maybe a
we have a
couple.
really low turnout with those. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they might be unaware, maybe. I don't, it's, yeah, but we don't really get a big undergraduate turnout for our guest meetings.
But it's not like we get a big graduate turnout, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, true.
So.
It's mostly officers of guests. So
Yeah, that's the thing about Bug Club too, is Bug Club technically is everybody. And so we've had grads and undergrads, but it's pretty much only undergrads right now. And so I think that's kind of like the strength of each one of those groups, is that one of them serves grad students a little bit more, one of them serves both, but they're both open to everybody. And so so bringing them together, I think we can take advantage of all those benefits at once.
Yeah, I think having activities is probably a great way to go, especially people are going to be really hungry to get together and do something after all this sitting at home, right?
That's the nice thing about entomology, is like there's bugs everywhere. We could go look in the cedar, we could go look at different habitats.
For sure, yeah, definitely. There's a lot to do out there. So if you're interested in our undergrad program out there, please feel free to email us or contact us. Is there an email, Amanda, that people can reach you at?
Yeah, so my MSU email, I'll just spell it. It's LORENZ, my last name, and then AM as in Mary at msu.edu.
All right, we'll include that in the show notes. And of course, people can find other ways to contact us through the department's website, which is also good. And also there is a web page that I'm going to link in the show notes that is specific to those people that are trying to join our department, and ways that you can do that for both undergrad and graduate students. So I would encourage everybody to check that out. And there are also lots of other interesting resources, so visit that as well. So Amanda, I really want to thank you today for taking the time to be here and talk to us and educate us on our undergrad program. I think it's one of those areas that we don't talk about enough. One last thing that maybe you can fill us in on. I think the 19 is a relatively high number for majors for us. Is that right? Do you know some of the historic numbers? Because I remember when we had like a handful, like a couple majors at one point only.
Yeah, good question. So when I started in 2017, we had 9 majors, and so now we're sitting at 19. I'm anticipating we'll get at least a few starting over the summer. But so now we're higher than we've been in many years. There was a point, I believe, around the time I was doing my master's, I think like 2010, 11, where we had a little over 20, maybe 20 up to 25. That's the highest that I myself know about. And so we're getting pretty close to that.
Do you know where these people are coming from? Are they switching majors from other disciplines, or these are starting off of, as a freshman for entomology?
It's all different. So quite a few of our majors are students who have changed their major from something else. Quite a few of them have started as freshmen undergraduate entomology students, and quite a few of them have transferred in from other places. And like, I'm usually got conversations going on with prospective students, so I meet with them and we talk about transfer credit, and we talk about what they need and how to apply and stuff like that.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that there is a diversity and not all just switching majors.
No, I'm excited. This summer we've had more folks apply and be admitted to the program than in a while. And like, obviously, like, students are still making their decisions, so they're not locked in yet, but it makes me hopeful. So we're picking up some steam a little bit.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Amanda, and thanks Natalie and Ariana for joining today. And thanks everybody for listening to the podcast, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.